Take one clunker, add some inspiration, and a killer tow beast is born. Today, the Suburban Gorilla gets closer to being uncaged. He's won the Baja 1000 17 times. Now Rod Hall is passing the off-road torch to granddaughter Shelby. That plus tech tips today on Xtreme 4x4.
Hey guys, this is it, the day that I know we've been waiting for, and I'm sure you have too.
Yep, call it the finale, the button-up, stay fini, completion. What else?
Say fini. Maybe the putting to bed of a project. Basically, by the end of today, everything on the Suburban Gorilla will be finished. Things like the cooler lines, the air filter, the intake tubing,
steering linkages, the axles. Let's show them what we're talking about.
Right on.
Now for the ultimate tow rig, we of course had to have the ultimate axles. Now starting at the wheels, we have Wilwood 6-piston calipers and massive 16-inch rotors, all mounted on a used 14 bolt that Mad 4-wheel drive completely tore down and stuffed with 456 gears, an ARB locker, and 35 spline axles.
Now the front axle started life as a 99 Dodge 3/4 ton Dana 60. And as you guys know, those axles have a 2-piece passenger side axle shaft with a centerline axle disconnect to disconnect it from 4-wheel drive. So to clean things up and make it stronger, Mad 4-wheel drive basically pulled that whole tube out of the housing and replaced it so we could run a single piece axle shaft on the passenger side, making it stronger. But the upgrades didn't stop there. The Dodge axle also uses unit bearings for wheel bearings, something like this. Now the downfall of these is they're non-serviceable, so when they wear out, you got to replace them at well over $100. And when you run oversized wheels and tires, these things wear out a lot more regularly. So we went ahead and they installed a Dynatrac unit bearing elimination kit that converts the front end to the older style tapered roller bearing, 2 wheel bearings, one on the outside, one on the middle, that you can rebuild if you need to, plus freewheeling hubs. And then the same as the rear, Wilwood 6-piston calipers and 16-inch rotors that are actually from a Hummer H2 big brake kit that basically help pull this thing down off highway speeds, especially when it's pulling a big trailer.
Considering that we started with a pretty torn up 87 Suburban, we looked towards a Hummer H1 for both style and mechanical inspiration. The result, one badass truck. Getting here was a huge undertaking with a ton of one-off parts, like our twin-turbo Duramax, all the super cool components inside, and not to mention all of the wiring. But in the end, it's the little things that take forever.
Like the air intakes for our twin turbos. Originally, we thought about mounting an air cleaner up through the hood, kind of like a typical H1.
But that looks silly.
So then we thought, what about mounting the air cleaner over here by the battery box? But we realized it's just going to eat a whole bunch of mud and dirt off that front tire.
Who likes to eat dirt?
So then we found that if we take an elbow, cleverly twist it towards the front of the truck, we can mount the air cleaner with lots of fresh air off the grill, maybe a shield to keep it from getting dirty.
And only when it's cleverly twisted will it really work. The inlet tubing is made with 4-inch stainless steel pieces. And now that it's all welded up, all we have to do is snake it past the radiator and onto the 2 turbos.
That is cleverly twisted. Now, if you remember, we replaced our typical 4-wheel drive steering box you'd find on a K-Series truck with a 2-wheel drive box conversion. That does a couple things for us. Lets us have crossover steering, so fewer moving parts, plus the 4-wheel drive box would have gotten in the way of our coil spring conversion. Now, we also moved the box up and back a couple of inches towards the firewall to make room for our front bumper. Now, all this means custom steering shaft. You should try to keep at least ½ inch of clearance around the steering shaft. In our case, we have to clear the spring tower and the turbo. Then through the firewall where we'll hook it up to the steering column.
The Gorilla requires a lot of hydraulic line for the power steering, the hydro boost brake, and of course the hydraulic ram assist. Now you can go ahead and have some lines built with these crimp-on fittings, or you can go ahead and build your own using Earl's Dash 6 steering line and their high-pressure steel fittings.
The Allison 1000 transmission we put in this truck was obviously the best choice for towing and heavy-duty applications. But the problem is the model is so new that nobody is making parts to support this type of transmission. And with the cooler lines, we had a real problem. The stock lines use a steel line 5/8 of an inch with a quick connector. And this quick connector goes into a coupler in both the radiator and the transmission housing. But this thread is an M22. Nobody makes an adapter for this thread pitch. So what we're going to have to do is cut up a steel line, use this coupler, and a tube nut and sleeve to make it all work together. With the line cut and the tube, sleeve, and nut in place, we'll flare it with a 37-degree flaring tool. Now this is going to allow us to adapt our GM steel lines to our -10 braided hose, but adapting the shifter took a little bit more work. Now although the Allison 1000 does have 5 forward shifting gears, the manual valve only has 4 detents, just like a 700 R4. So that's what we did. We went ahead and modified a 700 R4 shifter cable to mount off the PTO cover right here.
On the other side, we went ahead and installed this Hurst quarter shifter because the gate locks are easy to control with this large lever, and not to mention, this handle looks pretty beefy.
Next, we're hitting the desert with off-road legend and Hall of Fame driver Rod Hall. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4, where the Suburban Gorilla is in its final build stage.
All we really have left to do is a little bit of plumbing issues and some new wires to run for the winches, and then it's pretty much ready for the road.
And you know, when we first started breaking ground on this project, we looked at the Hummer H1 Alpha for inspiration, and instead of modifying one, we cloned one.
Now Rod Hall Racing doesn't need to clone any Alpha H1s because they are Team Hummer. There are off-road legends, then there's Rod Hall.
My wife's very statement about me was early on, if I didn't have talent to drive a truck, I wouldn't have any talent at all.
With almost 200 victories, including being the only driver to win the Baja 1000 in a 4-wheel drive truck, Rod Hall is in a class of his own.
He's a legend out here. He's won just about everything. He's one of the key men in the sport.
Kind of sometimes think I was maybe born too late. You know, I might have been a pretty good cowboy too, you know, without the paved roads and all that kind of stuff.
At an age when most men are retired, this modern-day sand slinger still races part-time and runs Hummer's production team.
I mean, this is where I want to be. And why, at my age, would I want to be doing something that I don't want to do?
You know, he doesn't go on vacation. He comes to races because racing is his golf game. That's where he gets his enjoyment from.
Following in their father's tracks are sons Chad in the H1 Hummer and Josh in the H2.
Having my whole family involved with the racing program has been great.
Growing up the son of an off-road icon, desert racing has always been a part of his life.
It's special being the son of Rod Hall, no doubt about that. You know, I never went to a baseball game with my dad. I never went to a football game with my dad. We went off-road. You know, they're great experiences, and they're what now is, I think, is contributing to my love for what I do today.
Like father, like son, Josh has taken to the stock production class with those winning Hall genes.
This is, I think, the most difficult class to be a consistent winner in. But the fact of the matter is this is where the drivers are who are serious about competing against other drivers. So yeah, I love it. I love the H2. I love the class. I love the competitors. I'm proud of being in the class, and this is where I am.
Even at age 44, he still looks up to his boyhood hero.
He is the best driver I have ever ridden with, and I've driven with a lot of outstanding drivers. My dad was the best. And he still is. I mean, he's Rod Hall.
It's a family affair.
Eagerly awaiting her turn behind the wheel is Rod's 18-year-old granddaughter.
Woo! I love it. I want to hopefully someday be driving the H3.
At the Best in the Desert race outside of Las Vegas, Shelby awaited her first go-around inside the cockpit as the co-driver.
It's my first time and it'll be a lot of fun. I was a lot more nervous this morning. Now the time's coming, I'm just trying to not think about it too much so that I'm not too nervous.
Grandpa couldn't be more proud of another Hall conquering the desert.
It'd be really nice if he's hooked. It'd be great to see my granddaughter get out there and go race the guys and keep the name alive, huh? It'd be good.
Whatever the future may hold for Shelby, there's no doubt where Rod Hall will be.
We're looking good, guys. 40 years is a long time to be doing something over and over and over, but I certainly still enjoy the sport, and I'm going to be involved with the sport as long as I can.
This is my life. I love it.
You know, 40 years of off-road racing, you gotta respect a guy that commits that much to the sport.
Especially when he instills it in generation after generation beyond him. It's pretty sweet.
Time now for an Xtreme 4x4 tech tip.
Here's a tip for you. You've seen us weld bolts on our projects before to use as spare tire carriers or just to help out with a bracket. And we've told you before, you gotta watch out for the galvanizing fumes that come off those bolts. And if you just have one or two to weld, you can get away with working in a well-ventilated area and wearing a mask. But what do you do if you have a lot of bolts to weld on? Well, go ahead and pick yourself up a gallon of muriatic acid and soak the bolts in the acid for a little while before you weld them. It'll burn off all the galvanized coating and you'll end up with a clean bolt. This bolt you can weld on all day long and you don't have to worry about the fumes. What started as a small annoyance in our drivetrain turned into a huge endeavor. Our Allison 1000 transmission will not change gears if it doesn't know how fast the output shaft of our transfer case is turning. The problem we have there is the 205 transfer case was never offered with an electronic speed sensor, so we had to invent something. We called the guys at Advanced Adapters and had them send us one of their universal reluctor ring and speed sensor kits. Now this is designed to fit a 700 R4 transmission. Now the output shaft on our 205 is a lot larger, so we removed the stock plastic speedo gear and had the output shaft machined down by a local machine shop in order to accept the reluctor ring itself. Now we have a reluctor ring mount, we need to mount the speed sensor. So we pulled the rear housing off the transfer case, they fly cut it, drilled it and tapped it, and that way we can screw the speed sensor in and set it to the correct distance away from that reluctor ring. And once we put this housing on the back of the transfer case, we'll be good to go. While we're at it, we're going to update the output flanges on both front and rear to these 1350 units we got from Quad 4x4, as well as install some Dynotech 3-inch heavy-duty drive shafts.
You know the end is near when the fluids are going in. But when we're always out on the road, people ask us, how did you get that shifter to work? Or how did you get that throttle position switch to fit on that motor?
So that's what we're doing today. While we finish up this project, we're answering some of those questions that you guys have for us, like the power feeds to the rear-mounted winch. When we mounted this 12,000-pound winch, it came with power feeds that are about 6 feet long. But what do you do when the battery is over 20 feet away? You obviously need new cable. So we're replacing this with Streetwire's zero-gauge cable and attachable end pieces. Now there's a couple of benefits here. Number one, we can cut it to length off of a 50-foot roll. And number two, there's less resistance in this cable, so there's going to be less voltage drop across that distance. And that's because of the stranding inside the cable. Now a lot of people think that electricity flows through the copper inside a cable. But it doesn't. It actually travels on top of it. So when you have a multi-strand cable like this, there's just less resistance, more places for the electrons to flow. It's just like adding more lanes to the freeway during rush hour.
Radiator hoses can be complicated. There are aftermarket hose kits like this metal one with an adapter, or even a rubber universal fit hose. But we wanted to go with an OEM style, and there's a couple ways you can do that in the custom world. You can take a welding rod and bend it in the shape that you need it to go, take it to the parts store, and match it to the closest hose that fits. Or when you're at the parts store, just ask if you can buy a bunch of hoses and return the ones that you didn't use, which is exactly what we did with our upper hose. Now the 2005 Duramax radiator is a closed cooling system, which means it doesn't have a cap in it. So we went ahead and mounted this AFCO recovery tank, and you're going to want to make sure that you mount it as the highest point in the entire system.
Now the guys at Mad 4-Wheel Drive didn't have any heavy-duty diff covers available for our axles. So they shipped them here with just the stock stamped steel pieces. And if we back into a rock with these on the trail, it could possibly damage the gear set. The guys at Great Lakes Off-Road hooked us up with these heavy-duty tread plate units that'll definitely protect everything inside of our axle. And with this last little piece taken care of, we're ready to hook this beast up to the trailer. Now we stepped out of the shop into the POWERBLOCK Tech Center to finish up another project today, the ultimate trailer. Because if the ultimate tow rig's gonna hit the road, it has to have something to pull. And if you remember, this thing started as just a pile of steel. And now it's a pretty awesome looking 26-foot gooseneck trailer. Now today we're gonna be tackling all the wiring for the lights. And although that seems like a big job, our blueprints actually came with a complete wiring schematic. So all we gotta do is follow this, mount the junction box up on the gooseneck, easy as pie.
We held off on installing this upper cross member until today for a couple of reasons. One is we wanted to make sure that the height of the gooseneck was the correct height for the Gorilla. And two, we wanted to make sure that the winch was going to actually clear the camper. Thanks, Daniel. Now this worn 4700 workhorse winch is going to be mounted to the center of this cross member. Now the breakaway box for the electric brakes includes this small 12-volt battery that gets charged when hooked up to the truck. But we're going to use this AGM deep cycle battery instead. That way we can power the winch and still get that 12-volt source just in case the trailer decides to break away from the truck.
Lights. Ooh. Turn signals. Oh yeah. Well, there you have it, guys. The Suburban Gorilla, our ultimate tow rig, is buttoned up, and the ultimate trailer is finished, and the package is ready to rock. Now, this has not been an easy project. Tons of one-of-a-kind parts and a lot of work went into this thing. And I'm sure the question all of you guys are dying to ask is, was it worth it? Well, let's have a look and see what we have here as a total package. A wild-looking, one-of-a-kind truck powered by a monster twin-turbo D-Max, Allison 1000, and triple stick transfer case combo, bulletproof axles front and rear, and 38-inch tires. Basically, an extreme package for an extreme show, and that's exactly what we're gonna do next time. Take the whole thing out and test it. We'll haul on the highway, we'll camp at the trail, and then we'll pull a dead vehicle off the trail with our tow rig, and then we're gonna haul the whole thing back home. I know I can't wait, I'm sure you can't either.